Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our Webequie Supply Road live streaming session. Today, we are going to continue our short series featuring the study plans that are required as part of the federal impact assessment process. The purpose of these radio shows, or this series of radio shows in streaming sessions, is to help community members and the general public better understand what's involved in the federal impact assessment process, as well as the provincial environmental assessment process. The study plans are required as part of the federal process, where the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada provides the overall work plan called the Tailored Impact Statement Guidelines, or TISG, and the proponent or the project sponsor is responsible for preparing individual study plans for the different components of the impact assessment. So the process is a little bit different than with the provincial system, where there's a terms of reference that is developed by the proponent and submitted to the government for review and the public for review. It's a little bit of the reverse in the federal process. So just thought I'd give you a little bit of background there. With me today is a special guest co-host who's a familiar face to these streaming sessions, Ange Brooks. And Ange is a senior ecologist and manager with SNC Lavalin. Welcome, Ange. Glad you can fill in for Michael again this week.
Big shoes to fill, thank you.
They certainly are. And today we're going to discuss four different study plans: Caribou and Wolverine, wildlife and wildlife habitat, species at risk, and breeding birds. And all of these I know are of special interest to you, in particular the breeding birds, right?
That's true. Yep, that's my favorite.
So maybe before we get started, I'll mention something that's good to know, I think, in advance, and it's that each study plan has what you call valued components, or VCs, which are things that are important to, for example, community members, things that they value. And each of these valued components has um, unique study areas. So there's three different types of study areas. There's the project footprint, which is the same for every valued component, but then there's the local and regional study areas, and so these change for each valued component. So that's important to know this as we go a little bit further into this. We should also note, and that many of the studies mentioned in with each associated with each study plan have already begun, and some of them are almost complete. And this is because we as a technical team know um, what the regulators expect, and to a large degree, and so we're able to get started doing a lot of the field work in advance, which helps speed up what can be a very long process. A typical environmental assessment, individual environmental assessment, could take you know a number of years. So by starting the field work a little bit early, it allows the process to be finished hopefully a little bit earlier. So without any further ado, Ange, let's get started with our first work plan. Caribou and Wolverine. There's a lot to this study plan, lots of different kinds of activities, a lot of activities, Ange, that community members are interested in. Maybe you can run through some of the components of this study plan, as well as its purpose.
Absolutely. So, the purpose of the study plan is to figure out the diversity and composition of caribou and wolverine that are within our study area. There's a number of different ways, surveys, I guess, if you will, how we figure out that, how we gather that information. Some of these are the winter aerial surveys that we conducted for caribou and wolverine. We did a caribou nursery habitat survey, a wolverine occupancy survey, and we did last year a GPS collaring program for caribou.
Wow, that's a lot of different activities, isn't it, Ange?
It is very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and we've maybe we should talk a little bit about one in particular because we have some images that we can put up. If we can bring up slide number 7, Ange, maybe you can talk a little bit about the Wolverine occupancy survey.
Okay, sure. Yeah, this is an interesting one. So last year, as part of our Endangered Species Act permitting requirements, we had to do a Wolverine occupancy survey. And we completed that by having these run poles, as they're called, that you see on your screen, constructed. They're these wooden structures. They're screwed into a tree, and then there's poles on the ground supporting it. And what you can't see in this photo is there's a bait hanging essentially right in front of where that Wolverine is. That's what he's after. And what we want the Wolverine to do is climb up the structure. And you see on the structure where you have the numbers 1 to 6 at the back on those uprights, there's a bunch of alligator clips. And as the Wolverine walks through there, it grabs some of the hair, the fur, and pulls it out. And then we're able to come back and grab that later to send that off to a lab. So the idea is the Wolverine climbs up the pole, as you see, and goes after the bait. And what we're looking for to figure out if the Wolverine is male or females, you can see on its belly. If you take a closer look, you can tell whether they're male or female. And they usually have various identifying marks, different colorations in their fur. And we're able to figure out how many individual Wolverines there are that are coming to these. They're not necessarily the only ones in the study area, but the ones that are coming to these run poles.
Actually, can we bring
We
up
figured
slide
out,
number 6? Just to show another Wolverine slide. Sorry, Ange, I just wanted to bring this up.
yeah, so see, this individual is getting ready to jump up onto the bait that's hanging. Another thing we do to attract these guys to the run poles is we use a bait, a smelly spray that they put on the run poles, and they can smell that scent for kilometers and kilometers, and they just follow that directly to the run pole.
Wow, some great pictures from these wildlife cameras, Ange. They're amazing, aren't they?
Yes, exactly. So we have, that's what I forgot to add, we have 3 of those trail cams aimed at the run poles coming from 3 different directions. The images we get from those cameras are fantastic, and we
Yeah.
pick up a lot more species than just Wolverine.
Yes, as we'll see a little bit later on, I think in our photos. Maybe, Ange, you can talk a little bit about the Caribou GPS collaring work.
Sure. So last winter, we conducted a GPS collaring program with, we got all the required permits and with the objective of collaring 30 caribou. In the end, we collared 29. The reason why we didn't do 30, and there was no shortage of caribou to collar, was that last collar wasn't operating exactly how it was supposed to. So we opted not to deploy that collar. So you can see on this image, that's a female caribou, and only females were collared. And the collar that you see on there is scheduled to pop off after 3 years.
Okay.
It has a little device on there that it will automatically pop it off after a period of 3 years. And it's sending continuous information about the whereabouts of that individual, and we can track them on a website and see where they are in any given time.
Ange, why were only the females collared?
Well, part of the collaring program is we also need to do a caribou recruitment survey. So basically what that means is looking for caribou calves, which females um, were pregnant had calves were and the calves were successful, surviving through the winter. And that's also an aerial survey that we conducted in the spring of 2022.
Can you
And
tell
it's
us a little?
important just to note. So let me just let me
Sure.
just say 100% of the females that were collared were actually pregnant, which I was really surprised. Every single one of them was pregnant. So this recruitment survey that'll happen, sometime early this spring, we'll be able to figure out how many of the calves survived through the winter
Wow, that's
because
going to
they will
be
stay with, yeah, they will stay with their mother. They will still be with their mother at that point in time.
so we can check in. Our team can check in real time and see where the caribou are, right? The tag
Yeah,
caribou are.
exactly. So we'll know exactly where to go to find them for this recruitment survey.
Any initial observations based on their movements and that you can sort of share with us?
Yeah, interestingly enough, quite a few of the caribou have migrated up to the coast of Hudson's Bay. So they're quite far away now from Webequie. Um, I would say less than half are staying roughly within our study area, but by far more than half are way up in Polar Bear Provincial Park area.
So and would those be the subspecies that have a much larger range?
Yep, that is why can't I think of the name? The not the boreal, I don't know why it is escaping me at this moment.
That's okay, but
Yeah,
they're the ones with the
there are
larger
two
range.
subspecies. They are the ones that travel further north in the summer and then come back in the wintertime. I will remember that word. It'll come to
Don't
me.
worry about it. Well, you can get back to us on that later in the show. I just want to remind everyone that our phone number is call-in number is 1-844-424-0500. That's 1-844-424-0500. We have that now on the screen, which is great. And let's move on now to our next study plan, and that's another big one. Um, Very big one, actually. Wildlife and wildlife habitat. This is an important one. Another one, like Caribou and Wolverine, very important to community members because their dependence on land-based wildlife. And so maybe you can take us through the purpose and of this study plan and some of the field surveys associated with it.
Sure. So this one encompasses basically all the other wildlife besides caribou and wolverine. And by collecting all this data, it will help us to understand the biodiversity of the area better, the abundance of species, their life cycle, any seasonal ranges and migration patterns, and most importantly, sensitive habitats and sensitive periods for these particular species. Um, and this way we can identify current and potential disturbances during the environmental assessment.
And maybe we'll bring up, we'll start with slide number 10 just to show you some of the pictures of the various wildlife, terrestrial wildlife that we've picked up. So that's a
That's
moose,
a moose,
obviously.
bull
And
moose, a young bull
we,
moose. Yep.
let's go to slide 11. Okay, we've got just a treasure chest of wildlife photos, don't we, from this project?
There's, yep, black bear and another bull moose. That bull moose was picked up on those trail cams at the Wolverine run pools.
That's what I figured. That's a pretty close-up shot there. Yeah, so that's probably
Yeah,
the only logical explanation for being that close to one, I suppose. Eh?
yeah, exactly. Coming in to
So
inspect what it was all about.
yes, yeah, they're very curious, aren't they? The caribou did the same thing, didn't they?
Yeah, we have tons of caribou photos from the run pools. They're so curious. It's so funny.
And it's funny because they're herbivores, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, but they're just checking it out, what's happening. I mean, they're all
Uh,
attracted to that scent.
that must be what it is, eh? Yeah, yeah. It must be quite powerful, eh? They must be able to detect it from quite a long ways away.
Yeah, a lot of the field staff were complaining, if you accidentally got it dropped on your clothing or your hands, that it was almost impossible to wash off.
Oh, really? What is it? Do you, what makes up that scent? I'm just curious, you know?
I don't know what it is. I don't know, some sort of chemical concoction. You can buy it at Bass Pro. That's where it comes from. It's for hunters to
Sure.
attract. Yeah, yeah. I don't even want to smell it. I just the description of it is enough for me.
And maybe you can tell us a little bit about. I noticed we do some bat acoustic surveys. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So we have to figure out if there are any bats within the study area. The bats stick to the deciduous forest within the our study area, and as everybody knows, there's not a heck of a lot of deciduous forest. So what we do is we deploy these acoustic recording units, ARUs for short, and these little units pick up the ultrasonic calls that the bats are calling when they're out in the evening and all through the night looking for insects. So it's kind of opposite of the ARUs that are used for birds that pick up ambient noise.
So have we
And
detected
then,
bats
yeah,
in the
yeah,
study area?
there's been a number of species detected within the study area, including little brown myotis. That's one of, well, they're all endangered, but that's one of the more common endangered bat species that people would know. This
So
one
you
of the
could
smallest ones.
so you can tell the species, Ange, by the I guess the signal that they give off.
Yeah. So we
Oh,
run it through a software program, and it tells us what it thinks that the what species it is, and then we just have one of our staff go through a certain number of them just as a QA/QC to double check because it gives a sonogram of the calls, and each
okay.
species has a different sonogram, and you just have to double check that the software program is working properly.
So, Ange, we also do acoustic surveys on reptiles and amphibians, do we?
Yep, we do. Yep.
And is it the
And we
same
use,
process?
well, yeah, we don't use the bat ARUs. We use the bird ARUs for that one because we want to pick up the ambient noise. So we want to hear the frogs calling, the toads calling. Um, yeah, I guess just frogs and toads. And the reason why we have to use the ARUs for that subset of species is because we can't be there at sunrise or sundown when you would normally conduct those surveys because they're most active as the sun is coming up or as the sun is setting. And for safety reasons, and the helicopter can't fly in the dark, we can't be there.
Yeah. Ah, interesting. So, okay, let's move on to our next study plan, which is the species at risk study plan, which overlaps a bit with the other two, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Maybe
Quite a
you can
bit.
talk a bit about the purpose of that and run through the different species at risk in the study area.
Sure. Well, the purpose of this study plan is to identify potential impacts on a number of species at risk that are within the study area. You see listed here on your screen, besides Wolverine and Caribou. Eastern migratory caribou, that's the word I couldn't
Ah,
remember.
that's it. Yes. Okay.
Yes. But we've also got a number of birds, bald eagle, barn swallow, Canada warbler, all-sided flycatcher. There's your little brown myotis, that's the bat, and of course, lake sturgeon.
So have we seen all of these, Ange, in the study area?
We have seen all of the birds except for yellow rail. I don't know about, I don't think we've seen bank swallow. It's just been
Okay.
noted. I think that came up on the breeding bird atlas, but we haven't actually observed one. And we haven't sampled any lake sturgeon, but we know they're in the study area. As I noted earlier on the radio show, there was one day when our fish team was out and they were at the airport in Webequie. A bunch of the community members were coming back from one of their fishing trips, and they had a lake sturgeon with them. And where they told us they caught it is exactly where we figured lake sturgeon would be, but we weren't actually sampling specifically for lake sturgeon. So it was nice to know that they are. It's been confirmed that they're
Oh,
within our
that's
study
helpful.
area. Yeah,
Ange, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, we've done a number of aerial surveys of the study area of 2018, 2017, 2018, and 2019, I believe.
yeah,
Maybe you can explain to everyone a little bit about these aerial surveys, because they collect a lot of different types of information which feeds into a number of different study plans. Maybe you can run through those for us? Just a
sure.
description of the aerial surveys?
Yeah. So the biggest aerial survey we do is for caribou. That's what we call it, winter caribou aerial survey. We're looking for tracks. We're also looking for individuals. At the same time, looking for tracks when we find herds of caribou. We're checking for the sex of the individuals in the caribou, and there's see a herd right there. There's in addition to the antlers, so the males have the bigger antlers and the females have the smaller antlers. There's another way to check, and it has to do with I'm not exactly sure, but you can tell when you're looking at their rear end whether they're male or female. Um, but in addition to caribou, as we're flying over, we're looking for tracks of any other species, especially wolverine. We see tracks for everything: river otter, marten, snowshoe hare, moose. Of course, we mostly see moose too. We see a lot of moose during the winter. Um, the other species, red fox. I don't think I mentioned that
Okay.
before. Wolf. We see a lot of wolves. We often see packs of wolves around. You seldom just see a single individual. You usually see them in a pack.
So, Ange, when you do
Um,
this work from the helicopter, tell me how you do it. How many biologists are on the helicopter, and how do you divide the responsibilities?
okay, great. So we have three. We have one sitting on port side, one sitting on starboard side, and then a third person who's taking all the notes and the GPS points. Because the people looking out the windows are rhyming off the tracks as they see them, and it's just continuous. It's amazing how many tracks that you see in the snow, and you get really good at identifying the tracks based on the size mostly and the distance, between the actual footprints themselves, like what species it is. And, for example, river otter has a tail drag uh, as they're walking along. So that's an easy way to identify that species. But yeah, so three people, two observing and one taking notes. And it's a pretty busy time the whole time you're up
Yeah,
flying.
yeah, it sounds like it. And you fly transects lines that are perpendicular to the actual proposed route for the road,
Right.
don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. So they're about 50 kilometers, 20 or 50 kilometers on either side of the corridor, and they're spaced. I can't remember exactly, 5 or 10 kilometers between each transect, and the helicopter flies low and slow along each transect. And we often ask the pilot to circle around when we see tracks or something interesting to get a better look at it. And sometimes we come in much lower just to confirm. If we're questioning the tracks, especially Wolverine, we usually ask them to. We've actually had them set down, and then we go and we actually look at the tracks and take photos just to double check. But the great thing is to have a community member with us when we're doing these surveys, because they're amazing and they just rhyme it off. It's like river otter, snowshoe hare, marten. Wolverine.
It's automatic, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's crazy. The knowledge is
Well,
amazing.
yeah, it is pretty amazing, isn't it? And well, before we go any further, let me just remind our viewers that our call-in number is 1-844-424-0500. That's 1-844-424-0500. We have that up on the screen right now. And so let's move on to our final study plan, which is your personal favorite, I think, the breeding birds study plan.
Hmm.
Maybe you can walk us through this a little bit, tell us what it's all about and all the different activities that are part of it.
Sure. Okay, so the breeding bird study plan, it's for us to describe the biodiversity of birds and bird habitat within our project study area. And it encompasses all birds, raptors, shorebirds, waterfowl, birds that you find in bogs or fens, and open wetlands, as well as forest-oriented birds. So some of the surveys that we do include the point counts, the acoustic surveys with those ARUs that I talked about, waterfowl aerial surveys, and we include shorebirds with that. And then what I didn't mention in the winter aerial surveys, we're looking for raptor nests, specifically osprey and bald eagle.
Ange, I
And
noticed here,
your
my
favorite,
favorite,
the
Ange,
crepuscular.
yes, I like saying the word crepuscular, and maybe you can explain to our viewers what on earth crepuscular means.
Okay, so crepuscular are those species that are active at dusk and dawn. And within, for this study, that would be common nighthawk. But we're also, within those species that are active at dusk and dawn are the wetland obligate species. So the rails, herons, grebes, trying to think of what else is in there. Other waterfowl, more the cryptic species that are more sensitive to local disturbance. So they'd hear us coming when we're hiking into our point count areas, and then they'll just be quiet because they don't really want to, you know,
Is that why they're called
I don't know.
cryptic, Ange?
Cryptic, yes, exactly. So that's why we have the ARUs placed in specific wetland areas trying to pick up if these species are actually present,
Because
because
as
they're
you were
very
saying,
hard to get during point counts.
okay, and as you said, like the crepuscular bird surveys, we do them like we do them in person at dawn and dusk, or do we rely on the ARUs for
Yeah, I
those?
forgot to mention that. Yeah, we don't do them in person because we can't be there at dawn or at
Yeah.
dusk. So that's why we have the ARUs to pick up the presence of those species.
And the waterfowl migration surveys are big surveys that we do, very important ones too, because waterfowl is so critical as a source of food for community members. So we spend quite a bit of effort on those, don't we?
Yeah, we do. So we do the waterfowl surveys twice a year in the spring and the fall. Um, we follow along a 2 kilometer corridor. We also go upstream and downstream on the Winnisk River, and we try to cover off every water body within that 2 kilometer corridor, making note of species that are observed and approximate numbers, because sometimes there's just so many you can only make an approximation. For example, we've seen flocks of 500 mixed duck species, so we're just estimating. There could be 10 species in that flock,
Yeah,
and
that's
so we're just
challenging.
doing it's very challenging. You've got some of them flying around all over the place, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know if I already counted that one. So it's just an approximation.
I'm lucky if I can even count to 500 on a good day. Anyhow, we're well, thanks for this, Ange. This has been really, really useful and informative, and I'm glad you're able to sort of dive in and give us a lot of detail on that. And this actually wraps up our study plan discussions, our series. I hope you enjoyed our series of discussions on the different study plans that are part of the federal impact assessment process. We will be back again soon, probably early in the new year. But that doesn't mean things have gone quiet on the project. There's lots going on still. I really urge you to visit our project website and follow us through social media. Our website is supplyroad.ca. And we will be keeping in contact with you between now and, of course, you can call at 1-844-424-0500 to leave your comments and questions. And we look forward to seeing you again in the new year, where we're going to have another series of streaming sessions. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Miigwech.